78, records. 78 records, you know what I mean? Not the long playing ones. These were short, and yes, and we wind up each time. I can see him now. I can see. I've forgotten now. It probably was Erich, but I don't remember who it was that would wind the gramophone up. And at first, the first lot of records were ones from the West, Richard Crooks, Marian Anderson, I've forgotten.
They're in the DVD.
Eh?
They're in the DVD.
Yeah.
The Incredible Weeks DVD.
Yes. Yes. Now I can't, but and I was familiar with some of them, with some of the songs, and yes, they were nice. But what really got home to me, what really really touched me, was the second period where we listened to records was Indian ghazals, and all of a sudden, of course, Baba did translate a lot of the words, and they're in my book. I wrote down a lot of the translations that Baba gave in intervals between the records, but the actual sound of those ghazal.
Yeah.
You mind the noise?
No.
Was wonderful. I found I was very moved by the singing.
I think it's going to be a constant feature.
Unfortunately, it's going to. Perhaps you should cut it off for the moment.
You won't hear that.
Yeah, that reduced. Yeah.
Oh, that's better.
Okay.
All right. Yes. Well, that was wonderful mornings, and somehow, particularly with that heart singing of the ghazal singers, the cry of the heart, with Baba sitting there, God Himself with us, and the room seemed to be filled with a certain atmosphere and warmth, and I found it very moving.
And when you asked Baba, would you come to Australia, apart from the gesture, has he given any answer? Definite answer?
No. He just said, "Do you think?" That was it. Do you think I'm not already there? Yeah. And yes, but we'll come to how he did come to Australia later on. And as I've said, there were, of course, many mornings where Baba just simply gave us discourses, would dictate on the board, and there were pauses. There was breaks in the discourse being given. And on one occasion, and this was, you could say, the most moving occasion during those 3 weeks. And that was Baba was giving a discourse, and he stopped, and I looked up, and Baba's head inclined to the right, like this, sort of a little angle, and his eyes were looking down, and all of a sudden his eyes reflected such a haunting sadness, a pensive sadness, that I just involuntarily said inside myself, "Oh, Baba, stay like that. So, you know, that was it. Stay like that. He was so. It wasn't only the eyes, but the face was so beautiful. And Baba suddenly just sort of casually straightened up and said, let's stop the discourse. You can just look at me for 5 minutes.
Wow.
And he went back to that position. And that was when I was very moved. It was I think the time when I was most moved by him and his physically moved by him.
Because your
His appearance and the eyes and the feeling that he projected. And what came to me while looking at him, which I enjoyed so much, and I felt so much. And what came to me were the words, he was like one who was homeless, and that all he sought was a home in each heart. Yeah. That was the most touching.
But you actually got your response immediately when you're inwardly asking him.
Yes.
He suddenly gave you
Yes. Yes. And what's interesting when you say that was it seemed so natural to me. Not in no sense did I think, oh, isn't that amazing that he picked up my thought? No, it just seemed so natural, and that happened on a number of occasions, or a few occasions with Baba, and again it seemed so natural that he would.
But it's an experience for so many people who actually visited Baba.
Yeah.
They was thinking something.
Yeah.
It happened instantaneously.
Yeah.
And that's amazing. You know, how
And yet, there's also that makes me think of the time when Baba called me in 1967 and said that I was to stay with him at Mehrazad for 14 days. And I remember the night before, I'm in Bombay, and the night before I go, I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness, I've been with Baba for 14 days. You know, each day, I better be careful what I think.
in 1966.
In 1967.
67.
Yeah, and what was interesting was that I never had any thought. I never thought of the world. I never thought of finances. I never thought of the family. Baba had to remind me to send a cable to the family that I had arrived. I was totally lost in him. Yeah.
So,
Anyway, that's 60. We'll come to that in time.
Also, it's interesting, you've often said that he responds to thoughts about God.
Yes.
But not thoughts about, I'd like another piece of chocolate cake. You know?
Yes. In other words, my experience has always been with him. It is in response. Again, will I say an example? I was driving him in 1956 in Sydney, and Baba had said, now you're a good driver, but keep your eyes on the road. In other words, when I first set off, I was going to...
This was his first time in the car with you.
And I would be looking at Baba. I'd have a look at Baba, as you do when you're driving, but Baba didn't want that. So I was driving him. This was after a few days. I was driving him along the road, and I was concentrating on driving as Baba wanted me. And of course,
What did he say to you on the first time?
Oh, yes, you're a good driver, but keep your eyes on the road. So I'm driving, and all of a sudden, Barbara's of course sitting alongside me in a bench seat, the seat of the car, and it was like a little bombshell that went off in my head, and I thought, it's incredible that this slight, silent figure that's sitting beside me is the only reality. That the whole universe came out of him. And the very thought, the whole idea of thinking of such thing was too much for me. And I thought, I can't think of that and drive. I'll think about it tomorrow. That's what came to me. I don't know why tomorrow. And Barbara immediately answered, and of course Erich was in the back seat, watching Barbara, always on the alert if Barbara were to gesture, say something. And Barbara said, yes, I am that. And I don't remember, he gave quite a bit, talking about himself and his status, his being God in human form. But I don't, I don't remember. But what is interesting is that after that experience, people ask me, do you believe? And I say, yes, I do, that he is. I have that inner conviction of his status, but without being able to explain it intellectually. All I know is that I have that firm feeling. So that was another thing, going back to the 3 incredible weeks, was that those times when we listened to the music and Barbara interpreted. It was a wonderful time. Such rich times with him. So wonderful and so satisfying. And there are little things that happen, of course, little incidents that come to mind when I talk about the 3 incredible weeks. A little thing that happened was I was standing in the compound of Mehrabad, Upper Mehrabad, just near the tin shed, you know, where we had meals. And I observed Barbara was sitting in the car. The car on this occasion had been driven in to the compound, and Barbara was sitting there, and Pendu was talking to him, went to the window, and I was watching, and for some reason, what came to mind, watching Barbara respond to Pendu's inquiries. I think it was about the final declaration meeting, the 2-day meeting, when Barbara had invited 1,000 men from India to attend. I thought, there is the perfect chief executive.
CEO.
CEO. For some reason, that's what came into mind. There was the perfect CEO.
Of the world.
Of the world.
All of it.
Yeah.
And when was the final declaration?
That was on the 29th and the 30th. The last 2 days of those 3 weeks. Yeah. And
That was an amazing time, wasn't it?
that was an amazing time. And then another, on certain occasions, Barbara would, I think I might have mentioned how he would stay over instead of at the end of the morning session, walk down the hill, or the car, he would get in the car and go down in the car back to Mehrabad. On occasions he would stay and be with us while we had lunch. And that was a nice time where Barbara there were two long. We were accommodated on two long tables under the tin awning that's alongside those two rooms that I mentioned. The west room and the dormitory is up top. And Barbara would pat this one. There was gestures, it was so loving and so natural that it was a delight to watch him. On one occasion, this was after one visitor that came from Japan, unexpected. He suddenly turned up. A relative, I think, had told him of Mayababa, and he came. And I think he was devout and wanted to. But after the contact with Baba, I've never heard anything further of what. There's certainly been no mention of him having had further contact with either Mayababa or with Baba people. But he came and he had lunch with us, and I remember so clearly. Baba went round the table
under the tin shed.
Under the tin shed, and then sat down on the ground, leaning against the post. And when I was there, I pointed out the post, because it's funny how certain scenes are so clear. And he's sitting there, and I was this side of the table so I could see. And Baba